Well done. He went in straight on the post office, and he did indeed sound a little like he did, quite a lot like he did when he was essentially laying a months-long trap for Boris Johnson, which Boris Johnson essentially ended up leaving the Commons as a consequence of.
Yeah, he's quite good at being a lawyer.
Yes.
Should have given that one a go in a former life. Keir Starmer in full swing lawyer mode. Yeah. But what was interesting for me was not about what Rishi Sunak said about Kemi Badenoch and about Martin Staunton, but what he didn't say. And he didn't repeat any of the allegations that Kemi Badenoch did in the House of Commons. He did not go full throttle in for Martin Staunton like she did. He didn't repeat any of that. So what does that tell us? Does that say that he's not quite sure that his business secretary is being entirely truthful? Is he happy to let her take the blame if something does go wrong? What does it say about
Henry
this?
Staunton.
Sorry, Henry Staunton.
What did you say?
I said Martin, sorry.
Who's Martin Staunton?
Apologies, Martin Staunton.
Well, have you got Martin?
No idea.
Sorry, can I just say sorry on behalf of Natasha Clark and
I'm
everyone
so sorry
at
who
LBC
Martin
to
Staunton is.
Is there a Martin Staunton? If we can find a Martin Staunton by 1 o'clock today.
I'm so sorry.
I'll give him a bag of cola bottles, which is inexplicably the fourth most popular
Henry
tweet
Staunton.
in the country. Yes.
Go back to the point. Yes, he didn't say what Kemi Badenoch said in the House of Commons, that he was he was the subject of a potential bullying allegation. He didn't repeat that.
No.
He just said, he had left after concerning behaviours were raised with him. He didn't want to go into any of the details on that. Why is that? Why doesn't Rishi Sunak feel confident to back up his business secretary? And we saw the same thing with Number 10 earlier this week. Obviously, she on Sunday tweeted that he was a liar. We asked Number 10, would you like to back that? And they pointedly refused to do so.
It's interesting. The idea that Sunak doesn't have much authority gathers momentum as a consequence of things like this. Because wasn't there a report also while they were in recess, that he had been perhaps minded to apologise to Esther Jai after doing a jibe about transgender people while she was in the building, and Kemi Badenoch's interventions on Twitter meant that he couldn't. I read that.
That was a suggestion.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. She doubled down on saying it was absolutely right for the government to go in on the political attack on Sir Keir Starmer that we saw at Prime Minister's Questions a few weeks ago, which obviously meant that he could not, if that was indeed Number 10's intention, they couldn't really row back without looking quite silly if she goes in very hard. But yes, he didn't go in very hard at all.
And he didn't repeat what she had said.
Didn't repeat any of the allegations.
In the context of the limping into the election to save the government money element of it as well. I spoke to Oliver Shah, the journalist who broke the story, just before you came into the studio, and I sort of sense that we may never get closure on this because it has a bit of a he said, she said. But my information regarding Henry Staunton is that he will have kept, because he worked for Charles Allen at Granada, who I know a bit, and if you were part of that team, you were on your tiptoes. Absolutely world-class, A-list, elite business people. So he won't have left
if that's the case, then
T's uncrossed.
Potentially, we see some of releasing of those documents. It has Henry Staunton got proof of these phone calls that he says, has he taken these contemporaneous notes? And if so, has he handed them over to the Post Office inquiry as well? Because you'd expect that if that did happen, obviously it's now happening in real time now, I guess. And I don't know where the Post Office inquiry does draw a line and stop taking evidence, but you would expect that to be handed over. And if I were Henry Staunton, then I would also be wanting to get that out into the public domain. And he's got an appearance in front of
Business
MPs
Select Committee next
week.
That
week.
Could be very interesting.
That could be quite a lively one if he comes armed with some of that proof.
Indeedy. Are we in an era, though, now, for a whole host of reasons, some speculative, some substantive, that Sunak's not going to sack anybody, is he, before the general election, even if they are caught in fairly tepid water or hot water?
Well, look at his track record for sacking some people. It did take him a long time to sack Suella Braverman. It took him a long time to sack his long-time ally Dominic Raab as well. He doesn't like letting go of his ministers very easily. So yes, I think Kemi Badenoch obviously trying very hard to make a mark for herself, clearly, but she
goes in like a wrecking ball. Unlike Suella Braverman, she doesn't want to be sacked, I don't think.
I don't think so. I think she's probably quite happy and content to be within government, to be a bit of a noisy voice on the side. But if she starts becoming a thorn in his side, like Suella Braverman did, and starts speaking out like that, he might think again. But I think you're right. I don't see him making any sort of example of her between now and the election. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, more evidence perhaps of the shallowness of the talent puddle from which Rishi Sunak is compelled to make cabinet appointments. So that went well for Starmer. Sunak did sound a little flat.
He did. He was very low energy, wasn't he?
He was very low energy.
Didn't feel like he had maybe he's on a fasting day.
Could be. Where did Starmer go next?
He used most of his questions on the post office scandal, unless I'm incorrect.
Let's look ahead.
Sorry, he did also talk about infected blood scandal as well, and payments owed, which obviously sort of moved the story
of history repeating itself in a variety of inquiries and scandals.
The problem is that obviously we didn't really get a smoking gun from Keir. Obviously he tried loyally to probe him, but we didn't really get many answers out of the Prime Minister. But neither can Keir Starmer come out of Prime Minister's questions and go, I've got you. But whether in the weeks and months to come, as more comes out about the post office, he will be able to point to that. The problem with this, and the problem with going on this, is that the public see both the government and the post office as equally to blame. The post office covered it up. The government didn't ask the right questions. The government didn't expose it. It's a bit of a plague on all your houses, which is actually quite a difficult political argument to make.
And David Cameron being in the chair when that panorama dropped. And I mean, you look at the effort that some of your former friends on right-wing newspapers have put into trying to malign Sir Ed Davey for being the post office minister for 19 months before the whistleblower came forward for Fujitsu. If David Cameron was a Labour politician, he'd be on top of a bonfire by now.
Well, there are many post, which we've discussed this before. There are so many post office ministers of different colours that are all jointly responsible for this. Ed Davey, perhaps, is probably just the most high-profile one. He's the leader of a political party, and you've obviously, you've had him on before, and you grilled him rightly so on that.
But that whistleblowing episode came long after he had left, and it came when David Cameron was Prime Minister, which was the other thing that Starmer referred to. Let's look ahead to this. I confess, Natasha, I'm not fully across who's proposing what and who's amending the other and who's going to vote in this way, which is a shame because I don't think I'd accuse any individual or party of doing this particularly, but there's a general air, perhaps, of the ceasefire falling foul to partisan self-interest in some of the exchanges that I've seen. So what exactly is going to happen this afternoon, and how do we think particularly Labour MPs are likely to vote?
So the Labour Party have moved their position on the ceasefire. That much is evidently clear. A few months ago, when Sir Keir Starmer was last in this headache, he was not calling for a ceasefire. He was calling for a humanitarian pause, much more in line with what the government was saying, whether you'd like to debate what the difference between a pause and a ceasefire is. The government still seems to think we should have a pause, then to talk about what a sustainable ceasefire looks like. I think for most people, it just looks like splitting hairs, doesn't it? It looks like you can't put a cigarette paper between all of these three positions. At the moment, it's the SNP who are in charge this afternoon. It's the opposition day debate, so their motion will get picked to be debated by the Speaker. We are still waiting for what the Speaker of the House of Commons, and in the next half an hour we do expect that he will say what amendments he has selected. So the government have put down their own amendment. That is quite likely to get selected. The Labour Party have also put down their own amendment. That is less likely to get selected based on convention. Will the Speaker rip up convention to try and encourage everybody to have their say today? There is a potential that could happen. There are rumours abound that the Speaker is looking at perhaps ripping up standing orders to make a bit of a big change. If that's true, then that would be quite something. But yes, I think most people in outside of Westminster will really look at those three positions and go, actually, is there much difference between all of them? And especially between the SNP position and the Labour Party. They are both very, very similar. Lots of people trying to play politics, aren't they?
Yes, I think so. And it's an unseemly sight given the stakes, given what is actually under discussion. But I mean, perhaps an inevitable one. Great stuff, Natasha. Thank you very much.